Okay, so this is a fun experiment. I am here with the delightful Sarah Climenhaga. Hey, Sarah.
Hello, Lorraine.
And in fact, although we are Sarah Climenhaga and Lorraine Smith, and you can see that if you're watching this on video, though most will be accessing this by audio or written transcript, we're taking a different route in this interview where we are both going to do our best to represent the non-human stakeholder universe. We could call that nature if we want. And so that's kind of impossible, but we're going to tackle it anyway with humility and curiosity and quite a bit of ambition. That's our invitation for this conversation. So just before we get into the nuts and bolts of the questions that anybody who's been following so far will know, I ask all stakeholders, so I'm going to be asking us too. I'd like to invite a brief round of introductions. So Sarah, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, the actual human you, and then sort of what gives you the right to join this conversation representing the rest of nature.
Okay, brief introduction to me. I'll start with grounding stuff. I'm a mother of three. I've lived in Toronto, which is part of the name of TD Bank, and I've been a TD Bank customer actually since I was very young. I am currently an entrepreneur, jack of all trades. I'm a coach to help people with their emotional, give them some emotional support. I'm a podcaster talking about parallel societies, what we can do in our own lives when we don't like what's on offer from the rest of the world. Also, I do some writing on current events and life, and I'm also working on a book about the nature of reality. So that's like a little bit of a thumbnail sketch of who I am right now. As far as why I'm, qualified to speak about this, and I think every person who you could ask with any kind of interest would have a cool set of qualifications. So mine is that first, as I said, I do have a connection, and in nature, we're all ultimately connected. I do have a connection to TD Bank, and I am nature, and so is TD Bank. Is like, it comes out of, it's in this world, so it's nature. So there's an already a defined, measurable connection between me and TD Bank. I am very interested and involved with how we relate to what we kind of think of as the natural world, and language is such a problem, but the stuff that's not human bodies or human made substances. So trees and soil and birds and sky and wind. The outdoors has become such an important part of my life. I always had a theoretical appreciation when I was younger, but not such a direct connection with it. And as an adult, I've really spent a lot of time in the wilderness, and in the wilderness of parks and remote areas, and in the wilderness of my backyard. And so I've seen, how things can look in so many different ways. Some of them that a bank touches directly, sometimes some that a bank doesn't touch directly, but actually might like to get its hands on and, manipulate in ways that I might actually not appreciate. So that's how I'd like to speak as a member of this community called nature, about banking and TD.
I love it. Okay, cool. Thanks. And I'll also introduce myself a little bit, but specifically with this sort of nature-based lens, since anybody who's been part of any of this materiality project will have probably heard more than enough of an intro of me. So what gives me the right to join this conversation in an effort to represent the non-human stakeholders whom I strongly recommend seeking perspective from for materiality? Well, the first thing that gives me the right is just realizing it's been missing from mainstream materiality. So when we do regular ESG materiality assessments, even though we may speak with people who have a lot of experience in biodiversity or something we might call nature, rarely are we directly inquiring of an ecosystem. What do you need? What does this feel like to you? What is your experience of this industry or this company's activities? And I feel that's missing. That's been a kind of sense of well, I've been sort of compelled to try to understand how we could do that better. So that's the first thing, is me just trying to do that better and seeking to do that right here and now. And then more specifically, I'm going to do my best to answer, I'm going to say on behalf of, that's not really quite the right phrase, because I don't really have the right to answer on behalf of anyone else, but I am going to try to center my thoughts in this bioregion. So the island of Montreal, the St. Lawrence River, the sort of geology and hydrology around here, because that's what I think about a fair bit. I run along the banks of the St. Lawrence River. I see both the built environment, so I see a lot of human infrastructure and activity, and then I also see the non-human aspects kind of peeking through and being and signaling and doing all the things they do. So probably Sarah, you and I could spend a whole day talking about our street cred on this topic, but why don't we jump right into to what we're here to talk about? And you already actually answered one of the questions that would be next, which is around your relationship to TD Bank. So that's super helpful. Thank you for getting to that organically. I'll say, as an individual, actual human, I'm in the same boat. I'm originally from Toronto, although I now am residing in Montreal. I'm also a longtime banking customer since childhood. And I guess in terms of the island of Montreal, or the bioregion where I am, my relationship, as, so now I'm speaking as this kind of natural entity, is as a sort of recipient of the results of banking. And so I'm going to call that like disturbance and receiving of pollution, or reoriented waterways, and all the things that happen when even sustainable infrastructure, so-called, is invested in. So as a bioregion, my relationship with TD feels a bit kind of trampled and trodden and not supported. So that's a view that I'm bringing in, is wishing to be better heard and understood by TD Bank as their non-human stakeholder. So with that, I'd like to swing things to towards the future. And here, Sarah, I'm going to ask you / your nature self to describe the future you want. And I want to just preface this a little bit by saying this exercise has come from a reaction to a lot of the sustainability work that's out there. So there's a lot of phrasing and framing around, you know, regenerative economy, sustainable development, et cetera, et cetera. But this is a place to put words to this idea of the future that are far more specific and personal. Like, what does it really look and feel like? What do you want the future to be? So in your words, representing the natural world, what's the future you want?
You know, so TD has a program, or they did, I'm not sure if they still do, they probably do, called Friends of the Environment. And they allocate little bits of money here and there to community projects to benefit, nature, what we think of as a separate thing from ourselves. Like, they're not coming to the tip of my mind, but there are all sorts of interesting projects, and it's lovely. And, they get their logo on it and people feel good about it. TD feels good about it. The groups that get the funding feels good about it. The land that is treated gently because of it feels good. So that's one end of TD. And then the other end of TD goes to funding massive mines and pipelines and projects which really hinder the capacity for life. They leave landscapes and they leave degraded landscapes and depleted ecosystems that life cannot generate from, at least in the short term. In geological terms, sure, but in the term that I'm interested in is this, in this particular corner of nature, I kind of like to have life being life-giving environments available to me now, especially when they already are. And what TD is funding on one side of the spectrum is to take life-giving environments and turn them into lifeless environments. So what I would love the bank of the future is Friends of Environment is no longer a peripheral tiny part of TD.
Hmm.
TD is a friend of the environment. Like there's no, in this way, it's kind of like we're mostly an enemy, but we have a little part where we try to be a friend. And I think that part of TD that wants to be a friend, that sees that has value, that wants to connect to the community, that wants to contribute to orchards or tree planting or park projects, like that's how magnificent could it be if TD was that. Those endeavors require connection, and there's a lot of degraded environments. What if TD could be financing reseeding those environments, or like growing mushrooms on landfill? There's a lot of very interesting projects that would require such a tiny fraction of the investment that the mega exploitation projects require. And so what if TD was a friend to the environment, and it really pivoted and just said, let's do that. Let's invest in this. And since we are, an intellectual storehouse of knowledge about finance, it is a really tricky question today in how does finance operate for life, for nature? How does it not go against life and nature? And so let's use our financial knowledge to see, can we take this idea of profit, and can we somehow make it so that it's profitable to grow mushrooms on cigarette butts and plastic bottles? Can we somehow make it profitable to take one of the mines we funded, and the wreckage left behind, turn that into something incredible? How can we, the people who understand profit and understand how to maximize it and generate great returns for our shareholders and our salaried CEOs, how can we generate profit in a different way? So to me, that's like the bank of the future, the bank that is the friend of the environment. You can get rid of your little, sort of small, tiny gestures, because you won't need them anymore, because you will be that friend of the environment, and you will be part of nature. And it's certainly a radical transformation, but again, there's so much ingenuity in that place, in all around us, and certainly in the bank, that if anyone could figure out how to change the profit model, if they had that genuine desire, I am sure that they could.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm just going to go meta for a second here. So, because the question was actually, what is the future you want? And I love how you sort of became the bank and started to use we, describing the bank, like we already invest in these things. And so I actually think that's a really beautiful twist that I wasn't expecting, because yeah, the bank is nature, and you are imagining on their behalf. And that's a really cool thing. We're gonna expand on that in just a sec. I'm gonna also answer the question, and I'm gonna answer it on behalf of this bioregion and neutral to the bank. This is the future I want. Whether TD Bank shows up in it or not is a question mark. But I'm just going to articulate the future I want. So I want a future where the waters that flow around this island flow unobstructed by human shipping routes, and sort of undisturbed by human shipping routes, actually, because a lot of what happens right now, from the history of the Lachine Canal to the more recent history of the St. Lawrence Seaway, it's almost like I'm in the way. And if I could just be sort of contained, deepened, widened, straightened, slowed, scraped and scoured and moved, then I would be a little bit more of a useful waterway. And then the humans could move all their stuff around more more efficiently. And also I'm kind of in the way. And so let's just throw a bunch of bridges over me so people can drive over me because, you know, once again, I'm just sort of in the way, this river here, the St. Lawrence River. And the result of that is I'm getting kind of mangled in the process, like from really obvious pollution issues to maybe more subtle, but I think more fundamental concerns around just changing how water flows here. And I see that happening in a bunch of ways too on the island of Montreal, just the way the city has been built and the redirection of natural flows down from Mount Royal into the river, all the things that happen when you construct and reconstruct. So the future I want is one where the water and the, you know, the micronutrients that come into the soil and circulate through the vegetation here are enabled to flow the way they're designed to flow. And one where, you know, there's a lot of migratory birds that pass through here. I guess we're on a flyway from Central America, and I've actually tried to figure it out. I know some birds come from Central America. I think some come from the southern US. I'm probably missing some important points of origin. But anyway, they pass through here and a lot of them hit the tall buildings. And so I want this space to be not just not deadly to migratory species. I want it to be sustaining and restorative to the migratory species that come through. So there's lots of places for all those species to kind of stop and refresh and refuel and do all the things they do on their way. And that's not a bother for humans. That's part of what makes being here wonderful and vibrant and thriving. And I like the idea in my future that I'm working with humans, that they're sort of stewards or active participants in what is going on, because I'm able to produce a lot of food, whether it's fish or, you know, fruit or the things that grow on the shore, and animals and birds to a degree. But I don't really feel like I just want to be a resource to humans. And so I will note, kind of just picking up a bit on where you were, Sarah, about Friends of the Earth. Like right now, one of the things that TD is cited for, in often they get kudos for it, is their natural resource accounting or their natural capital accounting. And I'm just going to say, as the island of Montreal and the St. Lawrence River Basin, I kind of feel a bit like sliced and diced and like a commodity. I don't, it's kind of like calling people human resources. I'm not a piece of capital. I'm like the biosphere that's keeping every human, including the 70,000 employees at TD, alive. So I don't think TD should be getting kudos for that. I think they and all the other banks need to understand we are not natural capital around here. We are life. So my future is where the banking industry and all of industry creates the conditions that enable life to thrive, which I think is sort of a paraphrasing of what you described as well, Sarah. Just before I go to the next question, and I'm going to do a bit of screen sharing, do you want to react or build to any of that?
No, I mean, it sounds wonderful. Basically, I just was, I think I was understanding the question just more about in relation to banks rather than my, dream world, just for leaving banks aside. I mean, ultimately, to me, the dream as anything that's part of nature is just balance. We're in balance. Life is constantly generating and evolving and connecting. And so, I really feel in my bones that we're out of balance, because it seems to me there's just so much more concrete than there is new growth. And if there's, and I see more concrete being laid down and less and growth being taken away. So to me, that my future has far more balance than that. And that's where, that's like, so I love that idea of the rivers in the way. and even us people, we're kind of in the way. We're kind of,
Yeah.
again, bringing it back to the bank, we're kind of in the way. Like the customers are kind of a bit of a problem. They make us like, oh, we have to open this office, and we'll have them stand in line for an hour, and oh, if they call, we won't really want to talk to them. Like people are in the way. The land is in the way. Like everything is in the way of what exactly. That's the question. So yeah, this future where none of us are in the way, we're all part of it. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna jump us forward, because in a way we've actually answered a couple of the typical questions I would ask before bringing this matrix up. So I just want to double check. Can you see my screen right now?
I can. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. So we're gonna answer this, what I describe as an impossible and really stupid question. So
Okay.
let me frame it, and then I'd love to hear what you think, and I'll try to answer it too. So what we're looking at here is a 2x2 matrix, and the vertical axis represents ecosystem health, and the horizontal axis represents societal health. Everything above 0 would be, in our view, or in the stakeholders' view, TD Bank is contributing to that future that we want. Everything above 0 contributing to that future we want, either to ecosystem health and or to societal health. And then everything below 0 would be undermining that future. So undermining ecosystem health, undermining societal health. It's already a bit specious to even ask this. It's particularly specious to ask nature how we think TD Bank is doing on society's health, but we're going to do that anyway. So I'm going to ask you, Sarah, to go first and tell me, where would you suggest I place this bubble on this matrix, and why?
Yeah, so I will resist the temptation to qualify. I'm sure your listeners and watchers know that we are not, I certainly, you maybe a little more than me, not privy to all of TD's internal numbers. So this is really a big picture sort of guess, but I'm coming from the point again of being part of the nature that's not directly humans and directly human made materials. Our entire economy is taking life-giving biosphere and turning it into death or wreckage. I mean, that's so harsh, but that's and it's not even completely true, because there's different kinds of life, right? Like there's uranium eating bacteria. There's different kinds of life at the end of our economic cycle, but our economic cycle basically takes, old growth forest and turns it into toilet paper that then gets clogged in the sewage system. So that's kind of what our economic system is. And that's success. Like that is measured as successful every step of the line in our current system. So I have to say that large banks are part of that engine that takes the old growth forest and turns it into waste that can't be used by anybody, at least at this stage. And so I would have to put TD Bank, well, definitely to the -5, okay, on ecosystem health, down to -5, or let's put -4.5. To me, maybe if we say maybe -4.5 is it's over, there's nothing, there's not nothing, everything, it's not nothing. TD isn't launching nuclear missiles everywhere, so I won't put them down at -5. Are they financing weapons? Very likely, but I don't know. But they're not launching them, so I won't put them in -5. Impact on societal health. So this is a little bit more tricky, because on the one hand, here I am in my house that I bought with a mortgage from TD Bank. I have a very happy life. I get money from TD Bank, or, I switched to a credit union, but for a long time was getting money from TD Bank every time I wanted to go buy food, including food from my farmer's market. I like the tellers. I'm actually running for mayor, and I'm going to be opening a TD Bank account because it's so close and convenient for this campaign. So I'll be going in, registering, using that to facilitate my campaign as someone who's speaking about what we can do to become a healthier, more beautiful city. So societal health. At the same time, big banks, again, they first of all, they drive out smaller banks. TD merged with Canada Trust, like mergers to me centralize things, which isn't, we need a diverse society as well as a diverse environment. So societal health, you know what, since I don't have enough knowledge to go further either direction, I put them in a solid -2.5, because I really do think these giant, inaccessible, centralized entities are not contributing to thriving health, but they have a role, and they, like I said, I have a good life, and TD has been part of that good life. I think it could be so much better, the way we live. But the fact is, I also can't discount, how I've benefited from TD Bank, and banks in general, and the Bank of Canada, and all that, all this economic system. So society health, yeah, I wouldn't put them in the positive, because I think small is better in every way. I wouldn't put them as neutral, because I still think it seems to me there's more harm than good coming from this kind of economic model for humans. But I wouldn't put them as negative as I did for the ecosystem health.
Okay, great to hear your rationale there. And I'm glad you went first, because you've given me a lot of food for thought. I'm gonna place my bubble, and I'm gonna sort of sound out why I'm putting it where I'm putting it as I go. So I agree with you on the degree of negativity for the environment, although I'm actually going to put it lower. I agree that they are not, to my knowledge, launching nuclear missiles, etc. But I'd say, speaking on behalf of this bioregion, I have zero evidence that suggests anything about their incentives, decision-making, or overall business model are predicated on enabling me to thrive. And even the things that are supposedly getting kudos for green finance, from what I can tell as a bioregion, are pointed in the wrong direction. As I said before, they're kind of commodifying me as a resource, as a source of capital, as something to be kind of sliced and diced and traded. And then, oh yeah, not totally trashed, but actually totally trashing it. And so, although I want to not put things on the floor, and I could see an argument, and I respect your argument, as the St. Lawrence River, who has just had zero say in something like the seaway slicing through it, until I see evidence of any genuine crumb of recognition of what it really means to create the conditions that enable life to thrive, I got nothing in the tank on the positive side. When it comes to society, here, for me, my motivations as a bioregion are looking for incentives, structures, systems, flows of financial capital that empower people to do those things that enable life to thrive. I do think there's a little bit of that going on. So it's not a total zero, but I'm going to say it's close to zero, because from what I understand, most humans can make more money investing in the kinds of developments that banks finance that are still undermining my ability to thrive than they can in investing in things that enable me to thrive. And so, purely from a bioregional thriving perspective, I see almost nothing that supports those humans to help me. And it's my point of view that if I'm not helped, they're screwed. Even if they, I'm glad you have a house, and real life Lorraine has seen your house, and I'm honored to be your guest there. But in spite of that, I'm still going to kind of stamp my feet and override and say, ultimately, you're not being served. You are being undermined by what TD is doing. And again, I'm slim on patience for that. The reason I don't put them at a out and out -5 for social is that I do see some signals of places where some humans could be part of financing things that start to change that. And we can talk a bit more about what that is in a minute when we get to some of the scenarios, but that's the logic for my ranking. So, okay, thanks for humoring that. It's kind of a really silly exercise because trying to put one like rating to a large, dynamic, massive company is a bit silly, but we did it anyway. And I'm now going to swing us into a couple scenarios, and just mindful of the time, I'm going to keep us moving forward here. So this first one, you've known me for a while, Sarah, so you'll know this is a question I'm building into this interview because it's a question I ask all the time in real life, which is you, and I'm saying you, Sarah, the representative of nature, are in charge of everything. Nothing is in the way. There are no limits, no barriers. What changes do you make to TD Bank?
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, immediately there's no more money going out to anything that's going to harm me, nature. So there's no, like, it's just like, oh, sorry, I'm so sorry, we committed to financing your pipelines, your mines, your missiles, whatever it is, your giant hydroelectric dams that require, moving people out of the way and flooding entire valleys. So there's me as nature. I'm like that. That's it for funding. Now I do have things are complex. Life is complex. So I'm aware that one change could result in something negative somewhere else, and negative for life, for the biosphere. So that money isn't just going to be like whatever it is that we're doing right now to make those things happen. We stop spending that money and we look, and we really look carefully. Okay, now what's happening? What happens when that happens? And while we're still like where do we go next? Because to me, I don't know where the banks or nature goes next when we stop cold turkey. But I sort of feel like stopping cold turkey is the right thing to do. And then, but really watching, really, really, really watching. So if we don't fund that pipeline, and then some kind of, I don't know, like what could be a consequence, but let's say Canada just says, oh my gosh, we have no oil. Our people have run out. We are now cutting down like homeowners are going and cutting the trees down in their front yard to, burn for warmth, and people are going out and trashing this and destroying that. So if that sort of negative backlash happens, that's the only thing I want to keep my future. I want there to be a curiosity and a waiting and a responsive nature. So again, the goal is to reintegrate into nature, to reintegrate our activities into nature. So, and then, like I said, when I refer to the mushrooms and the waste, I mean, the amount of waste we have created is so massive. And, my mushrooms are just like, I feel like we could turn into the mushroom bank. There is amazing things to be done by mushrooms and mycelium, and it's fantastic. And I kind of feel like, well, maybe we bring in the mycelium to run things with the humans, together. Is it the mycelium? Is it the soil? We like this language. It's so hard not to go out into magic land, where we're like, and then the fairies will come and wave their wands, and this is going to happen. Like I'm trying to stay grounded in actual, laws of nature, how things happen. but really it's just, we just stop. And humans, like, the power goes out, right? Like that power outage that happened a few years ago, the power went out, no power on the eastern seaboard. Unfortunately, I missed it. I was not in the eastern seaboard at the time, but wow, everything stopped. And the world, just for those 2 or 3 days, changed. Now everyone had the confidence that it was coming back and it wasn't global, but things didn't descend into some sort of or nightmare of mayhem. And so it might be, it's dramatic, but like, it's possible. Hurricanes come and change, like tornadoes change things, tidal waves change things, massive change happens. Like the world locks down for however long, and people aren't allowed to leave their houses. Massive things happen. So the part of me that I can hear saying, "Oh, this isn't realistic," and is like, no, massive things can happen. So yeah, it just stops. The funding just stops. The funding for those kinds of destructive activities are over. Then there's the period of waiting and adapting, and that part is where I can't see it. I don't know what it will be, what we'll be responding to. And then the end of it, after we've adjusted and recalibrated, is everything is just rejuvenating. It's always like, what innovation is next that is completely circular? Every the food we buy and where it comes from and what happens when we've digested it, and what keeps us warm and what keeps us dry, all of that is now circular. And whether it's banks, whatever it is, there's just, to me, a whole constellation of different ways of doing things. There's no more this central way. There's these individual, and is it banks, is it community centers, what is it exactly? I'm not sure, but I see it as we're a constellation now of small communities, 100, 150 people close together. Like we can't fit 7 billion, 8 billion people all spread out on their own homestead, close together. So I still see these beautiful cities, with the orchards you discussed in another conversation we had, like with the rivers, with the wetlands, between blocks, like, so there's the people, there's the music, there's the art, there's the food, there's the refuges, and then outside the cities there's all this land that humans really are just visitors at best, some places where maybe we don't even go. And that's how I would love to see this world evolve.
Oh, you're reminding me why I really wish you were in charge of the universe. And I hope your mayoral campaign is a wild success for at least that part of the universe over there. Cool. Well, I'll add to that. So I also get to be in charge of the whole thing. So for a little while, the bioregion around here is in charge of everything. And so what I ask the bank to do is pretty local to here, because I'm really focused on my waterways and geology. And there's two things that come to mind. There's lots I could think about, but there's two that I really want to tell the bank about right now. The first is to stop fighting winter. So what I noticed around here is, on the one hand, the humans are told to like go play, like go spend lots of money to drive outside of the city and ski and snowboard and snowshoe and like, kind of be a snow tourist. But on the other hand, do everything in your power to fight the cold and snow. And so that means removing the snow. It means dumping a lot of sand on the roads. Here, they don't use salt. Thankfully, they used to, but they don't now. But still, it's like this one great big battle to kind of tame the winter. And
sorry, just a second.
Yeah, no worries.
I want to call. Okay. Oh, he's not okay.
I muted you there, sir. What I'd like to see is for the city to recognize that winter is a wonderful place, that winter is part of our community here. And we want snow. We want we want cold. And not only that, but when we have slippery surfaces, we can get around in a different way. So one of the things that I see happening is that the way humans are functioning around here right now is all about how to make it easier for cars to come and go. More cars, bigger cars, faster cars, and then we just sort of change the tires in the winter. But from my perspective, that's not only really stressful for me, but I see a lot of really stressed out humans. Like I hear the humans and I've never heard them say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I'm sitting in all these lanes of traffic right now. It's awesome. So I'm just proposing that TD Bank be part of actual sustainable infrastructure investment, where it listens to the seasons. To that listening point you made, Sarah, the bank is listening to the seasons, listening to what is easy to do at different times of year. And in the winter, it's easy to slide. So use means of transport that slide and stop removing the snow and ice, because, you know, if you haven't noticed, it's kind of everywhere all winter, and just take good advantage of it. So there's lots I could say about that, but I'm tired of hearing of this talk of sustainable infrastructure that's entirely predicated on stopping me from doing what I do, because like, you're just not going to win. And also it's not sustainable. I don't like it. It's hurting me. And then the other thing that I would love to see TD doing, and so since I'm in charge, I'm just going to get them to do this, is instead of those friends of the earthy kind of projects that are token, lovely, beautiful, nice, but the exception, coming back to something you signaled off the top, Sarah, these become the norm. So for example, the ruelles vertes, the green laneways that are quite kind of cute and trendy here in Montreal, that are beautiful uses of back laneways. No. Like those are kind of the exception. They're hidden. They're like these little gems. That's the norm, TD. That should be how all passageways are. They are biodiverse. They're bird, bee, butterfly friendly. Humans feel good when they walk through them. Food is produced. And that is actually sustainable infrastructure, because it sustains us, it restores us. And when I say us here, I mean me, the bioregion, because then those micronutrients can flow, because then those migratory species are welcomed and they're glad to pass through here and they thrive. They pass on the seeds up to as they go north, etc. So that's what I'd really like to see happening. I'm going to switch back to my interviewer hat. We've just got a couple minutes left. I've got one last question, and this one is super short and sweet. So, Sarah, the question for you for nature is, you're no longer in charge of the whole universe, but you have a direct line with the CEO of TD Bank, Bharat Masrani. He takes your calls straight away. He wants to know what you think, but you only have 30 seconds. What do you say?
Oh boy. I mean, the thing that comes to my mind is it's time for you to, I'm grateful for everything you've done so far. You've had your time, and now it's time to pass the torch to someone who wants to take the bank in a new direction. I feel like there's no wisdom I could give someone who's been operating from such a different mindset in 30 seconds. You know, and again, maybe I'm trying to be too realistic about this. Like, what would I tell him? So to me, it's easier to say, thank you for what you've done. And I'm excited about the next chapter, and let's pass it on to someone. Let's pass it on to the river. Let's pass it on to the mushroom. Let's pass it on to the bird. Let's pass it on to, and you know, yeah, and help them, like help them with your wisdom as we go into this new chapter. You know, and if there was no option B like that, to sort of kick it to the next person who can answer it in more than 30 seconds, you know, I guess I would just say, are look around,
Mhm.
look all the way around. And is this really right? You know, is this really what you want the world to look like, that you've been creating? And I'd be curious, you know, like
Mhm.
that's what I would say. Um, yeah, I guess I'll stop there. You know, I feel like there's like 10 different angles I could take in those 30
Yeah.
seconds, sort of cheating.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I can come up with, you know, right now.
Cool. Yeah. And I know these are kind of cheeky questions intentionally. So as the bioregion here, I would almost just go with your last point there, which is, well, kind of a combination of your points. Would be handed over to the bioregions, a collection, include the St. Lawrence River Basin, get the Great Lakes in the mix, bring the north, you know, go to the northern watershed that flows into the James Bay and Hudson Bay area, you know, bring members of the tundra, bring them together, look around and listen. So that's my 30 seconds. I was cheating by
Yeah.
a timer. And I know we're a little past the time we had. So I'm going to bring us to a close unless there's anything you want to add, Sarah, that I like didn't ask about, but you feel is really important to put on the table on behalf of your natural lens there.
Not really. The only thing I'm thinking about is, you know, if TD and anyone is listening to this, you know, like part of this is to tell them, or it's to just point out, you know, where else could you go? And so I feel a little bit, I don't know, like, oh, is that really helpful for me to tell them you need to leave? You know, from my point. But at the same time, I feel like I am saying there is something fundamentally different. So about how where we need to go if we really do want to be the bank that's the friend of the earth, or to live in the world where we're all friends. And so if you're truly interested in that, and I think anyone that listens to this is truly interested in that, like
Mm-hmm.
you might have the 30-second pitch to make. You know, mine might not be the right one, but you might have it. And so I would love to hear what your next step is.
And the you there is to the wider community listening, you mean?
This is the you to the bank,
Uh-huh.
you know,
Yep.
to
Yep.
knowing what to do with this
Yeah.
materiality assessment, is like how to go forward with it, you know, productively. And so
Yeah.
I think, you know, you've done this amazing sort of looking out at speaking for the bioregion, speaking from the view of what things could be. And I just want to, I guess, add from my own perspective that I want the people that are listening to know, okay, we're the ones who have the expertise that could actually make the transition. The
Yeah.
bioregions, Sarah and Lorraine, are telling us what the vision is, and we are asking ourselves if we share this vision. And if we do, now it's us. We have we're going to be the ones who take the next step. So I just want to make sure that message is clear, that it's, you know, yeah, the vision, and then the next step could be very exciting when it's done with the bank, or with the, you know, whatever the big corporations we're looking at. So anyhow, thank you, Lorraine, for letting me put in my last little 2 cents there. Banking lingo, 2 cents. Look at that.
I was just gonna say, just leave it with CC, it'll grow. I think interest rates are going up. With that, I will say thank you very much, Sarah, nature, bioregion around here, for keeping us all alive, and I'll bring us to a close here.
Awesome. Thank